welcome,
It's
Michelle.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so welcome to the Mitches podcast. Today we have Michelle Forrester.
Happy to be here on this Sunday. Love it. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Yeah, we were just having such an interesting conversation that I was like, maybe we should be having this conversation on air.
Yeah.
On air. This is. I was looking at all your books. Lots of poli-sci books.
So it turns out we both have the same degree.
Yes.
Poli-sci history.
Yes. I have a poli-sci communications
Okay.
double, but a lot of poli-sci, I guess, was history. Did you do a second degree in history as well? Or it was like a double major?
It was a double major.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, poli-sci communications.
Okay.
Yeah. So almost. Yeah.
And now we both hate politics.
Now we're completely out. I would love to talk to like Canadian political science students who finished their degree in the last 10 years. Like we should do a survey if any of them are working in politics, still care, or can stomach it. Because I think I can no longer stomach it.
No. And what I found around COVID, I got really obsessed with the Bronze Age, which was this period of history I'd never really engaged with much. And it's, a civilization that fell. And I think it's like all the concern I had for politics, like I gave up hope on making any change or anything good happening. But it's like that thinking about this lost civilization is now where my political, like my love of politics went into that.
Okay, so you stopped caring about what was happening currently now, and then you just were romanticizing a fallen civilization. What is the Bronze Age? I don't think I know that.
The Bronze Age is like before the ancient world. So most of what we know, like Socrates and Plato, like ancient Rome and ancient Greece are just, it starts about 800 years before the year zero. Okay. And then before that, there was a Dark Age that's like 800 BC to 1200 BC. So
is that like the Middle Ages?
It's sort of Greek Dark Ages. Okay. But yeah, it's similar to the Middle Ages in like there was a loss of civilization, so there's a loss of language. So before that is like ancient Greece and Egypt, and there was a civilization in Anatolia. So there's all these older civilizations that fell, and the ancient people had myths that went back to that time period. So when the Greeks talked about Troy, that was Homer writing down a myth that was based on something that had happened in the Bronze Age. So initially, everything we knew about the Bronze Age were myths from the ancient world about their earlier time periods. And now we have all this science that actually is showing us what happened.
Wild.
And it's cool because when a civilization collapses, people don't all die. It's just that they lose sophistication, so they stop having a written word and everyone gathering together in cities. They just kind of go into the country. Okay. So like the Greek alphabet, they had an older writing style that they lost, and then they picked up the Greek alphabet we know is actually like from a Jewish people called the Phoenicians, that the Greeks borrowed it from after they'd lost their own alphabet.
Okay. So when a civilization falls, by the way, I just want to say I have never been more interested to learn history. Like I just realized that the only people who talk to me about history are men, and that's why I hate listening to them talk about it. But when you talk about it, I am so beyond enthralled. Like I could talk about this all day. So when a civilization falls, basically it just loses its like, there's things that it loses, like language. You said something else.
A political sophistication.
Okay, political. You said they lose its like all its sophistication, and so people just kind of go into their own camps. Is that what happens?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you ever look at that framework and then kind of apply it to like where we are right now, and if we're heading in that direction? And sometimes I do that. Like last semester I was doing my master's, so I was TAing, and I was lucky enough to TA for this professor who was teaching like the history of like basically like Eastern thought in China from like the Mongol ages all the way to the like 21st century. And it was very interesting to even learn about like how much like political tolerance and religious tolerance there was. Like, even though like Genghis Khan was like definitely colonizing and pillaging and like built this huge network, not a chill guy at all, like really doing a lot of heinous things. There was never a better time for like tolerance, which I thought was very interesting,
because he didn't want to like impose his religion or system.
There was no imposition, like, exactly. And I'm butchering it when I'm retelling it, but it was very interesting to kind of see that dichotomy of like, you know, as like he was going in and colonizing, but then in the colonies everyone was just kind of allowed to do whatever they wanted, which was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And that's probably not totally accurate, but
no, but I think I've heard that similarly.
Yeah.
Like, and I've never studied him specifically, but he sort of like went through a lot of other civilizations. So yeah, you hear about.
And then there was also this kind of there was all these like pillars of like, you know, he wanted people to prosper. So it's like, as much as he was colonizing and kind of like, you know, destroying cities and stuff and taking a million wives, he also just wanted everyone in under his reign to like be successful and stuff. So he would put like actually like his own money into the economy, and so the economy would thrive and people were, you know, doing well, and then with that came a lot of just like the most amount of religious and political tolerance, which I think is so interesting because that's so what we lack now, I feel.
Yeah.
We're like moving in, like, yeah.
And I do sometimes think like there's going to be a total societal collapse, and other times.
Yes, I feel that way too.
There's also just things like there is up and downs with like how much people tolerate globalism. So it's like,
yes,
we've been in a period where we were really pro free trade, immigration, other cultures, open. And then people in some ways don't benefit. And you might find like the economic situation in your country isn't going well, but other people are doing well. So then people become angry, and then they start to like pull back from globalization. So like Brexit is like, yeah. So
it's like stand up, like you see, it's like people are succeeding around you. And if you're having a bad time, then you're mad at them. But if you're having a good time, then you're excited for them.
It took me a long time to admit that I do that, because
I think everyone does it.
Yeah.
I think it's like, I think anyone who claims that they don't get jealous or that they don't envy, like, you know, things that other people are getting, I think, or like spots or opportunities, I think jealousy and envy is like a big part of, it's built into the fabric of what we do, and it's because what we're doing is so close to home and it's so like individualistic and stuff. So, and especially in Canada, it does kind of feel like there is a limited amount of opportunity. So we are in kind of this like famine, we do have this like famine mentality towards it. So I think it's normal. I just think like whenever people are like, oh, I get jealous, I get envious, I'm like, yeah, that's normal. Like that's the first step. But then the second step is like curbing that, you know what I mean? And not letting it like bleed so deeply into your practice, because it's just not going to really help you.
Yeah. And you hope like if I'm feeling jealous, if it causes me to like work harder, then that's utilizing it well. But if I just start like shit talking people or like not helping people because I'm like, well, she's getting too much right now. Like it becomes the like crabs in the bucket phenomenon. Yes. And like that's, of all the things that can poison an artistic scene, like that's like one of the major ones.
For sure. And so I think, it just takes, I think, the emotional maturity to be like, I'm feeling this. I'm not going to feel this all of the time. Let me just get it out in whichever way I need to get it out, which means like, if like you need to shit talk it out with like one of your friends, like just do that and then move on. Like,
like, can I say some petty shit to you?
yeah, exactly. Can I say some petty shit and then get it out? And then that's like a means of processing it, I think. But back to your saying about globalization and how people, there's like different eras of acceptance towards that, or enthusiasm, I think you were saying. And I think we are also moving in. It's interesting too, because when I look at places that have like high level of like protectionism, for example, there are some benefits to protectionism as well. Like I'm from Montreal, and Quebec has a lot of protectionist laws surrounding their language, you know, and their culture specifically, and like a lot of heritage laws, even just like to be honest, like even in just like the buildings, like in Toronto, it feels like, you know,
you can knock anything
you can
down.
knock anything down. You can erase anything. In Quebec, there's so many insane heritage laws that you are not able to do that. So, and that comes from obviously like the fact that Montreal is like one of the older cities in Canada. So obviously there's that, but there is like this very deep passion that of course at this point has been taken too far and is kind of going into like a fascist territory, but to keep like the culture and the language alive, and as a result the arts scene thrives.
Yes, because it's cool that like French Canada has its own celebrities and it literally like its own culture. It doesn't just stare at America all the time.
No, it doesn't at all. It actually is so focused. It's so like insular and protectionist in that sense that it's so focused on keeping it alive that like, you know, I grew up with my mom. My mom is French Canadian. I grew up with like my mom consuming French media, like French radio shows, French talk shows.
Do you look like your mom?
Yes, almost identical.
This is like a very classic French Canadian sort of look.
Really? Oh my God, I've never been told that.
Do you ever look at Justin Trudeau and think he's a cousin?
No, I've never thought
Maybe
that
he's
ever.
Bad to compare to because I feel like people hate him. But like Timothy Chalamet
he's hot,
is
so like I'll take it
on like part of his family. But
okay, that I could see.
That like French.
Yeah. I've never been told that in my entire life, but I could see it. Like, well, the other like caveat is that my mom is adopted. So like, she was adopted into a French Canadian family, but I'm not sure like if her original parents were French Canadian. I actually recently I was talking to her about it because we've been talking maybe about like looking into her roots, because I think for a very long time she didn't want to because she had such a like beautiful connection with her mom and like her adoptive mother, who she considers her mom. So she didn't want to like dishonor that in any way. Yeah. And my grandmother's been passed now for like almost 30 years. So I think now my mom's like, okay, maybe we'll look into it just, you know, out of curiosity and just, you know, also for health reasons and stuff. But it's interesting because she came from this like we put it together that she was adopted out of this kind of prolific orphanage in Montreal that has all these like insane like periods of like darkness. So like I've just kind of been like, Mom, like what do you mean you never told me that it was this orphanage? And
like maybe she's like the kid of a nun that was
so she knew her cousin. She told me like, so her and her brother were both adopted out of that orphanage, and then also their cousin. So the cousin, I think, or I don't know, someone that she knew, it was like a nun and a priest had a baby. Shit. And then they like of course could not claim that child, so they just like they put the child for adoption. It'd be fun to grow up at the orphanage, but you were with your parents. Yeah. That would be like a great sitcom, you know, of just like an orphanage, and then there's just like one kid and he just has to like pretend like he's an orphan, but really his parents own the place.
I love it.
That would be really great. I was thinking more of like, I was like, that's just like great, like what a story, you know what I mean? I just like, I want to, like, I was like, that could be a film. But what was I saying before I went on this tangent? Oh, French Canadian. Yeah. So I think when I look at that, like French Canadian culture, I'm like so inspired by the way that they consume their own. Yeah. And I think a similar, like my best friend and her partner just went to Japan, and they came back and they were very like obsessed with the culture, and like they would always be like watching videos. So every time I was over, we would watch videos, and it's very similar in Japan as well. Like there's kind of this like protectionist thing, but the art thrives, and like people really consume like Japanese art and Japanese culture as a result. So I don't know, maybe there's pluses, but there's definitely minuses as well.
Did you see Pachinko? It's this show on Apple TV.
No, I
haven't seen this show, but I did a book club during COVID and we read the novel, and it's based on like it tells the story of a Korean family over 3 generations, but they're some of the Koreans that like live in Japan and never get citizenship. So they sort of because Japan is so weird about giving out citizenship. They have like ethnic communities that still aren't Japanese, even though they've been there for forever.
Okay. Yeah.
It's super good.
That sounds really good and really interesting because I know Japan and Korea have an interesting history.
Yeah.
So
and I feel like it's hard to get into certain histories because you haven't seen any movies that take place there. So you don't, like, it's hard for me to imagine Japan during World War II or like any part of Korean history because I'm just like, what show would I base that on? So when you read a book or watch a show, you're like, oh, I get it. That's what their vibe is.
Yeah, it helps to like put things in reference, which is why I think like TV and movies are so important in general, because I think like I feel like I grew up on TV and so many of like the things I know and learned, I feel like I learned from the television. You know what I mean? Or from books. Because if you don't have the luxury of like being able to travel, or like when you're young, you don't really put it together. You know, that was like always like a big reason my parents ever really were like, well, we're not going to go to somewhere cool when you're like 6. Like you're not going to remember it. You're not going to appreciate it. You're not really going to get the difference. So like apart from like living in different places for vacationing, like it kind of like my parents didn't really see the value of it until we were older. So the only form of escapism you really have is like TV and books. And so I feel like I saw the whole world according to like the way it was shown on television. And that was a very, I mean, growing up in the 90s, like that was a very specific lens.
Yes.
Now it's better, definitely. And like representation and stuff is better. And different people are telling different stories. But in the 90s, it was like not that. Yeah. It was one lens. You were watching it through one perspective.
I feel like TV should sort of give you like a general sense of things, like what kind of things are going on in the world. Like the number of people who don't know where anything is on a map is kind of crazy. Like even like where I think like as somebody who's interested in that, how long it took me to sort of know where different places were and have a sense of what that vibe was.
Yeah. I know where nothing is. The only thing I can tell you is like I said, like I took a politics of Africa class, and my professor was like very adamant about us having this like geographical sense of everything, because it really does to kind of like feed into like geography feeds into so much of politics actually, and we don't often ever talk about that. But she was so obsessed with us like memorizing the map of the continent. So now I have a general sense of where all those countries are in Africa. But like if you throw a European map at me, I have no idea where we are.
I think it would honestly be a good idea for like to get kids in high school to just look at maps and get someone from the areas to just say like, this is a stereotype of every type of person in this area. So you can remember like who's next to each other and like why they don't like each other. Like, just like, oh, like a France and map. England, they're right here and they hate each other. And then but you do that with like Asia and Africa, so people like just remember where everything is and have like a starting point for like who's near who. And
it's like a friend group, like you want to walk in and know the dynamics of like who likes who hates each other, who has slept with the same people, who slept together.
It would be slightly racist, but it'd be more like regional bigotries as opposed to just like we don't regard any people over here.
Well, I think if it was just solely focused on the dynamics of things based on histories, then it wouldn't be, then we wouldn't really have to rely on stereotypes. We would just have to rely on history.
It like who's got beef?
Yeah, like who's got beef, like, you know, and then like when they beefed and like where are they now in the beef, you know what I mean? Like Japan and Korea, you know what I mean? Like where are they now?
I feel like Korea is making like a huge comeback.
I love Korea. Like anything Korean, I'm just like so obsessed with. I feel like I always see like, I'm really into kind of like fashion and lookbooks, and every time I go through like a Korean like fashion lookbook, or I find like an influencer that's Korean, and it's like the fashion that comes out of Korea is like 5 years ahead. It's always like so like just so like gorgeous, like everything.
I love it.
I nerd out about Korean fashion a lot.
I don't know as much about fashion, but now I want like resources for...
Oh, I can send you stuff. Like there's so many like creators, and it's just stuff that you would like never even think. Like it's stuff that like our Western brains like could never even like conceptualize. It's like I feel like it's like silhouettes and shapes and stuff that I'm like, oh, we could never, you know. Not in Toronto in our aloe hats and our Aritzia leggings. Like there's like literally no way that our brains could conceive it.
I feel like we keep recycling the previous decades while slowly moving more into just wearing pajamas.
I think that's the most accurate synopsis of like the current trend. Yeah, for sure. I think people are really, it's not even just in fashion. I feel like it's the same thing with music. Like I have beef with like the songs that are playing now that are back. Like it's all the songs that like I used to have to listen to nonstop like at high school dances, because it's like now it's like fully like 15 years ago. So it's like music from 15 years ago that's being brought back, but it's like I had to listen to that music like on a weekly basis for like 3 years. So like to bring it back now,
it's not, you're not nostalgic for it.
No, I'm not nostalgic. I'm actually just like, stop playing it. Like, please stop playing it. And I think it is, I forget where I saw this, but it was this like assertion that like people are addressing and listening and kind of consuming, like we're remediating like all the elements from the 90s, because like people regarded the 90s as this kind of like golden age. And so it's like things are so dire and desperate now that we're like trying to just like be part of like a time when it was better. But I don't really like that adds up, I guess, for the 90s. But now we've moved into like 2000s core, and it's like the 2000s were bad. Like 2008 was a financially famously financially terrible year. So I'm like, why are we dressing like we're and listening to stuff like we're in 2008? We are in the exact, like, we're in a recession as well right now. Like, just
I also felt like it was like the 90s had this really cool thing that happened in the first half of it, and like with the grunge era.
Yeah.
And then it became kind of self-important and annoying.
Yeah.
And so the 2000s were just washing that out, but in a way that was kind of bad. Like what I remember about that decade was like everyone was kind of anti-fashion, and then suddenly everyone had like a $1,200 handbag, or they were saving up for it.
Yeah.
The celebrities became people we never would have respected in the 90s. People kept going to Las Vegas, and that was like the coolest thing you could do, was like you and your friends would go to Las Vegas and waste money, and it just it was like it didn't feel like there was culture in that decade. It just felt like we were too self-important in the 90s, so now we just have to be really fake for a decade. And so I'm like,
a good read.
What are we going back to? Like there's nothing substantial there.
Yeah, I'm wondering like if Vegas was the place to be. I'm like, why haven't we seen like more fashion like from Vegas? You know, like showgirl.
Which would at least be fun.
It would be so fun. I am like dying for rhinestones to be back. Like, let's do something other than a baggy jean. I just need something else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was looking at photos the other day of like Mary-Kate and Ashley in that like, I feel like before whatever now is, which is really like baggy and monotone, I think, and they actually had like kind of 90s, like their fashion was very cool and very interesting, and I would like that.
Yeah, they did a lot of color, right? Because I think they like blonde, blue eyes, like they were able to wear a lot of different things. Yeah, they had great style. There was some great moments in the 2000s as well for style, but then we just like, you're right, like everyone kind of just moved into this like I'm really nervous about like infinity scarves coming back, and are we gonna do skinny jeans again? Like I'm nervous. Like I don't know that I could do a skinny jean. I feel like I've been wearing like baggy clothes for like the last 3 years. Like I just don't put me in a jean. Like that's like gonna be absorbed by my crotch. Like I'm just worried.
Although I'm like in the age group where some of my friends just didn't stop wearing skinny jeans.
And like, listen, some people really pull them off. Like sometimes you can see a skinny jean and a ballet flat, and it's like that's personal style and it works totally. I'm totally with you.
And I think it's okay, just once you're over 40, you may choose just whatever decade you're in to just say, you know, I'm digging in and I'll stay here.
Yeah, totally. I'm just worried about it like being like the only thing you can buy.
Yeah.
That's really what I'm worried about. Yeah. Because I don't think I'll go back to skinny jeans.
Yeah.
I say that now, but
I think I will.
You will? You like them?
I think that really worked for me.
Then you should wear them. They do not work for me. They do not work with my body type whatsoever. It's very like top heavy because I have like a big butt and big thighs, and then like, yeah, no, it didn't work well.
Is there any fashion, current or former, that you've absolutely loved?
Okay, I love like anything that's like Parisian and classic. Like I love like a cigarette pant. Like, I think like a black dress pant never goes out of style. Like I kind of am into like that like office look. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's just like certain things that are classic. That have like, you know, survived the test of time. I love. Yeah. I don't know if I answered that question. Like classic. Yeah. Very like classic stuff. Like there's sweaters that are classic.
Did you ever have a bohemian phase?
Oh God. Did I ever have a bohemian phase? Probably. Yeah. Yes, I did. When I was like probably 18, 19, that's kind of when it hit the first time. But it doesn't really, like my idea of like bohemian to me is like baggy clothes and like a baggy leather jacket, like I like a lot of oversized things, and I've always kind of liked things to be oversized. That's kind of my definition of bohemian. But in terms of like the scarves, the feathers in the hair,
you're not gonna rock a shawl.
I'm not like a hippie girl at all.
Yeah, I feel
like weed is the only thing that's like that me and a hippie have in common.
I feel like because I have curly hair, I'm like supposed to be bohemian.
Yeah, you are supposed to be.
But I like really classic stuff. I like preppy stuff, and I like preppy. Sporty stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think those things kind of they're kind of evergreen. Like they never really will go out of style. I do like some good. I find sports stuff is very hard to kind of style. But when it's done right, it's like A+.
Yeah.
A+. Yeah. Yeah. I'm such a nerd about this. My sister is like she has a degree in fashion marketing, and she's like working to be a stylist, and she comes up with like the coolest outfits. And so I'm just kind of.
And is she still in Montreal?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So she just does such a good job, and I just fangirl her closet because I currently cannot afford to like really be, and that's like, I think that's like the one thing about being broke that's really awful, is like you really do have to give up some things, and I think fashion is one of them. Like I try my best with like my thrifted items, but I think thrifting we've gone too far.
It's like
in this city,
it's not cheaper anymore.
It's not cheaper, and also it's not unique. Like it used to be that like at least in Montreal, for example, like it used to be like you would go and you would find these like unique pieces that like no one else really had. And that was kind of what was so fun about thrifting. And of course the price point was great. You know what I mean? But it was like you were mixing and matching. It wasn't supposed to be like everything thrifted. And I feel like in this city, it's like thrifting has become so like such a hobby and stuff that it just, you're just walking around, everyone's walking around head to toe thrifted, and it's just not really, we've missed the point. Like it's just like now you're just wearing other people's clothes. Like you're not like, and then also there's like not as much of a vision with like like I don't know, I'm going on a tangent.
Yeah, but no,
like, do you know what I mean?
It's like you were supposed to get this like one pair of boots that were so unique. And then the rest of your outfit was more like fit in with what the rest of the girls your age are wearing. But your outfit was unique because it kind of centered around this like interesting piece.
Yeah, you had like this piece that was like supposed to be precious and like cool and different and kind of like an accent piece. And it's okay to have like multiple of those in your outfit, no problem. But I feel like even now, there's just kind of like a uniform with thrifting. It's like, you know, like even some of the brands have become like, the thrifted brands have become like quite ubiquitous, you know, like Harley Davidson, like Carhartt. Like it's like everyone is just sporting those. So it's like, it's a lost, it's like magic, I find. And it just kind of, this is so like mean to admit, but it just like, I'm walking around the city and I'm like, everyone's just wearing an ironic t-shirt and like jeans that don't fit them and then a tote. Like that's just, there's just like too much of a uniform that I feel like we've just overdone it. And now I'm like, I have to thrift because I can't really afford anything else at the moment. But
do you find though that always, like even before this current moment, like Toronto is a very matchy city?
Toronto is such a good city for uniforms. Like people really know, and I think that's like the big success of like too of like the hustles, like good with routine uniforms. sounds like I'm talking about a completely different group, but anyway, and like kind of like a regurgitation of things. But I think that's just a feature of like being in a big city.
But I feel like sometimes like I'm on the subway and I look around at everyone and I'm like, we are definitely all rocking the same fashion. And it's
everyone's wearing the same outfit.
It's kind of cool because you see all these people who naturally look quite different and they've managed to all, you know, like you could take a photo of the subway car and it's like, here's a group who fits together cohesively. But I'm like, but there's
like we're all cast in the same movie.
Yeah.
And it's like so funny because it's like, I love Toronto for how diverse it is. It's like even more diverse in Montreal, just I think by sheer size. But then it's like, it's so diverse, but then yet it's like everyone's doing the same thing. So it's like the most interesting thing to look at because you're like, whoa. And you're right. It is very cool in the sense of like, oh, like, okay, like that's what it looks like, you know, there's so many like different kinds of bodies and like people look so different and it's like, but then we're all wearing the same outfit.
Yeah. Whereas I feel like Montreal has always had a more...
It depends where you go. I'm not trying to assert that Montreal is like a better style in any way. Like I think there's different, like you go to the plateau of Montreal and it's like everyone's wearing the same outfit as well. The suburb I'm from, people would just...
What suburb are you from?
I'm from the suburb right outside of Montreal called the West Island.
And what's it about?
It's predominantly, if you ask them, it's just a bunch of people who would tell you that they live comfortably, but it's upper middle class, white, very white. Actually, some parts of it now are not so white, which is good. But when I was growing up, it was just like everyone looked the same and everyone dressed the same, and it wasn't good either. Like it was like everyone dressed badly
together.
Mm-hmm. Like, when like, I don't know if you remember when like Michael Kors was having its big moment and, you know, they had the rain boots. If you went to the West Island, everyone was wearing the rain boots.
Amazing.
Yeah. And like Lulu leggings. And it's like the same, everyone had the same outfit. And that's why when I'm in Toronto and I'm expecting to see like people dress differently, I'm having that like PTSD of like, oh my God, like everyone's a clone.
The suburbs.
Exactly. It's not the suburbs, it's the city. But yeah. I hope I don't get too much hate for saying that. But I think, I don't know. I think people sometimes lack vision when it comes to like their style. And I think it's a hard thing to kind of nail because you have to do a lot of research actually.
Yeah, and if you're not, like,
and if it doesn't interest you, then who cares? You know, I have so much respect too for people with like a daily uniform. Like my dad has a daily uniform. Like he wears the same. Like he has a pair of jeans that he loves, and they're Levi's. I think I don't know the number, but he wears like the same thing every day, and that's his uniform. Yeah. And he doesn't really think about it. He doesn't have to get out of bed. He gets out of bed, and it's a part of his life. He doesn't have to think about it. And I envy that a lot because I feel like
dad was out supporting you at a show we did together, and he seemed like a very cool guy.
I don't think anyone's ever described him as very cool, but he is. No, he's the best, and he's really supportive, and it's really cool that he came to like a bunch of shows. He even came to like I did a Don't Tell spot, and he came to that show, and he was just so and
our Don't Tell spot's very vulgar.
No, but it was just like, it was cool to bring him to that because it's like usually a packed show and it's like, you know, it's got this like kind of like household name. So it was like cool to bring him there. But it's funny because then people like kind of knew that he was my dad. So then they like the host was like engaging with him and he was like such a good sport about it. He's very like, he's very happy and proud of me. I think my mom doesn't really get it, but he's very like, this is cool that you're doing this. And he's like, you're actually not too bad at it. And I'm like, thank you. Thanks, Dad. But growing up, my dad was very stern.
Oh.
Yeah. like stern presenting. So like he worked at the bank, so he was a very serious bank man, and he would like he would have to wear a suit every day. So he wore a suit every day, and he would commute to work, and then he would come pick me up wherever I was, like either at daycare or wherever. And like everyone always knew him as like, he was very serious. Like he would show up and he'd be like, okay, get your stuff, let's go. You know, you like presented as kind of like gruff and like stern. And so people really were scared of him. Like my friends were, my guy friends growing up were so scared of him. My girlfriends were scared of him. Everyone was scared of him. And I wasn't. And it's so funny now because it's like he was never scary to me because he was my dad. And I also got this like much softer, like more caring side from him.
Yeah.
That he didn't necessarily show the rest of the world. And so that has been interesting in dating because now I go for guys that present as something and like and are only nice to me in private. And I don't think that's a good type to chase usually. I don't think that's a good.
Yeah, but I know I have, because I work in a kind of serious office, and they think there still are those guys who are more like serious in general, but yeah.
I think he's just like cerebral, like he's very jovial when he's like out doing social things, but other than that, he's just not really, he's more of an introvert. I think my whole family is, like my mom, my dad, my sister, they're all introverts. And so I think he's just someone who's like not gonna talk if he doesn't have to. He's not, and it depends on like what mood he's in. He's not gonna be like overly friendly with people. He's never rude or like, but I guess growing up that meant that compared to like maybe other dads that are more like jokey, like he wasn't like that with everyone. He was just he's just a quiet person. So, yeah.
What's your mom like?
My mom is really silly. It's so funny. I get so much of like my love of comedy and stand-up from my dad because he was he loved to listen to it. Like he would pick me up and we would listen to like Louis on the way home or whoever was on, like George Carlin, whatever was on like the radio. But he loved that channel, so we would listen to that a lot. And he loved SNL. Like he would make me watch like old SNL episodes. Like he really was like an avid consumer of like comedy and all things funny. And my mom just is so silly and has like a very silly sense of humor. But she's also pretty serious. She works, she's a CPA, like an accountant. Yeah, I know. A banker and an accountant. I'm Canadian, isn't that the wildest thing? And she's she's super hardworking and like really has high expectations for herself and like works herself to the bone. Like she works 80 hours. Like I just grew up with my mom working 80-hour weeks and my dad also worked. Like they just both worked a lot and that was kind of their life and they were like very serious. And then on the weekends they kind of let loose a little bit more. Like that's kind of.
And is it just you and your sister?
Yeah, just me and my sister.
And she's older? Or?
She's younger.
Okay.
Well, she's my older younger. She's younger in age, but she's like in a lot of ways way more mature than me.
I guess because you got the funny personality, which isn't usually.
Yeah.
It's not a big sister vibe.
Not usually, no. Big sister vibe is usually like, like kind of like stuck up. It's
like a second mom, right? Like she's
a little bit, yes.
Rebecca, you need to pick up your things.
Yes, like kind of big sister vibe is like scolding. I'm gonna tell on you. Don't take my things. Like that kind of energy, and that was never our dynamic. It was always kind of the inverse. Like I was the one that was like, let's hang out. She was like, no. Okay. See you at dinner. Yeah. But now my sister and I are very close because we're only 2.5 years apart. So it's like when we entered our 20s, it was a lot easier to just relate.
Yeah.
And so now we're like very, very incredibly close. And I'm really grateful for that.
And then both pursuing creative paths.
Well, so my sister works in banking as well right now. But she is trying to, she did her degree in fashion marketing and she's trying to like pivot into finding, I guess a more creative role. Yeah, definitely.
So tell me more about, you said you did a master's in writing.
I did a master's in writing, yes.
So What was that like?
It's so funny because I'm having mixed feelings about it at this very moment, because it's like I left my comfy tech job to pursue this master's and really kind of naively was like, I'll be able to find a job after, no problem. Like I can, you can leave the workforce. And in my mind, I was like, I can just jump right back in whenever I needed to.
Yeah.
That's very much not the reality. And so when I just graduated, and so it's been about like 7 months I've been trying to find a job. So I am a little bit like salty of like, did I make the right decision? But overall, it was really fun. It was really engaging. It was really hard too, because I think like I did my double major like 5 years prior to even considering this. So it's like your brain goes into a different place when you're not in school, like when you're in the workforce, you know what I mean?
Yeah, there's like a resiliency you have around sitting down to study. You probably don't even notice it, but once you're gone for that long, you don't know, and then how to write an essay or
you go back. And also like I went back, what I thought was valuable about it, and I think like if someone was to ask me like the benefits of going to work and then waiting a few years and then doing your master's, was that like I realized how much of a joke academia really is. Like, you know what I mean? Like and it's like, I saw it too, because some of the students that were in my cohort came right out of their undergrad. Yeah. And I have so much respect for them, because that is so many years of like back to back, like school stress, right?
Yeah.
And I think like, especially universities, like they don't really tell you how to manage your stress around the things that they mandate from you. And then there's also no perspective. Like when you're in school, it's like, yeah, of course you want to do well, and of course you want to get good grades, and of course your GPA matters and stuff. But like at the end of the day, you're there to learn and like pursue something you're passionate about, and you lose that when you're just trying to get A's. Yeah. And also it's like, it's so funny, and it could just be like in the arts, but never once like did I ever have an employer ask me what my GPA was. And the amount of like nights and like sleep I lost in my undergrad just trying to like, upkeep this like standard that professors were feeding to us, that's just like not actually real in the real world. And it's like, it's so funny now, because I have so many friends who work in academia now, like they just like never left and they're going to be professors. And it's like, that's everyone in academia. Like everyone in academia, like there's a very small percentage of those people who've actually worked like in the real world. And it's like, then I went to go work for this like big corporate company and realized that like, oh my God, like they set the bar so high, and like the bar, that's just not in application. Like people are so like incompetent on a day to day in corporate. And it's like in school, they like kind of like beat you to be this like uber competent person, and like to like, you have to do this, and it's like so competitive and all of these things. And then it's like you go to your first job and you're like, okay, the people that have been working here for 20 years like don't even know how to like properly write an email with proper grammar. Like that, is this making sense? I know it's like I'm kind of on a tangent, but I went in so disillusioned by school and academia in my master's that I was like, this is all a simulation. So
it's like they bully you at school to be a certain thing, and then when you get into the work world, you find out that thing has no value and maybe doesn't even exist. And then there's like a whole other game that's going on, and now you have to learn that.
Yeah, and they don't like that corporate game of like the networking of and all of that. The social aspect that is mandated in almost every industry, they don't teach you that in university.
I feel like people tell you that there's like networking, and I just didn't understand what anyone meant. I still have trouble with it, but I think what I thought when I got into the work world was like, you need to get your friends to do shit for you. And I was like, well, I'm not in an elite social circle. I'm not at the country club, so I can't. And I didn't understand how much networking can just be like asking people in your own group for advice on your career. Like it's not that complicated, but it is social. And I was like, I'm not an ass kisser, and I'm not like gonna get favors for things. So then I thought networking was this weird thing, and so I didn't do it. but it was just this like fundamental core thing that everyone should do.
It's just like social interaction with the people that you work with, and especially like in the corporate ladder. Yeah, it's like it's so much more about building genuine connection than I think people think. Like when people say networking, people do have that like exhale of like, ugh, like I'm not an ass kisser, like I'm not gonna be fake, I'm not gonna like, you know, go to this event and like try and like connect with as many people as I can and be fake. Like I think that's what throws people off about networking, where they're like, I have to show up as this like character of myself, and I don't want to do that. And I don't, you know, if you don't feel like genuine as a person, it's like very hard to like have those interactions. It's very draining. That's not networking. Like true networking is actually finding within like your industry, finding people that you genuinely can be yourself with, and you can actually deeply connect with. Because again, when it comes to like opportunities and when it comes to like giving people things, people will always give things to people that they trust, and they're not gonna, that trust has to be built over time. So it's actually, networking is actually just like building friendships in your industry.
And if you think about like if you're in university and you're really isolated and you don't talk to anyone, you miss shit that's happening in your class. But if you're just part of like the social network, and let's say you're in a study group, then everyone's like, oh, this is how I did it. Did you guys remember? And you have this like wisdom from that group that helps you stay on course. So then in your work world, you kind of have to put together like a study group, but it's not all people at your own level. Sometimes it's people ahead of you or behind you, and they know your story and your capabilities. So they may tell you, oh, you know what company you'd be good at, or you should talk to my friend Brenda, and you might fit in her area or something. Yeah,
totally. And it's like, I think people put a lot of pressure on themselves to become friends with people that they think can open doors for them. And I think, like in a lot of ways, like that's like, I guess what we attribute to like social climbing. And some people are like really fantastic at it and can kind of zero in that way. But ultimately, that only gets you so far, because the only people who are really going to respond to that are social climbers themselves. So they see that as a currency, and they like buy into it. But truly, like any opportunity that I feel that I've really like I can attribute to networking has been like just what I said, like building friends and keeping up with people in a human way. That's not like overbearing, and that's not like immediately like, oh, Karen, you're my friend. Okay, now that I did your podcast, can you put me on your show? Like this kind of like transactional thing. It's like if you just find people that you really like eventually it kind of just like all comes together in this very natural way, where then you'll look back and go, oh, I guess that was networking. Yeah. You know what I mean? That's like, and I think in my mind, that's like the most valuable kind of networking in any industry. Yeah. In stand-up, it's like a little bit different because you're also dealing with like egomaniacs. So like maybe you do engage in more of that like transactional kind of, you know, exchange of goods and opportunities. But even in stand-up, like I feel like the people that I try to surround myself with are actually people that I really care for and deeply connect with, and I feel like know me, because it's like in stand-up you want to be able to like get as close to who you are as possible in order for it to really in order for you to really stand out as like.
And I feel like there's some people who are good at sort of like pressuring people, so they get a bunch of initial opportunities. Oh yeah. But people don't have like a genuine interest in them.
No, and also you want, again, I think trust is such a big piece of it, because it's like, for example, like let's just say like fast forward like 5 years, I'm in a position, hypothetical position to like, I don't know, like let's say I'm directing something. I don't direct. I don't think that'll ever happen. But let's say I was like, if I'm a director and now I'm like, okay, I want to cast people in this like thing I'm making, I'm going to go towards people that I trust, because I need people who are going to show up on time, going to be professional, going to not fuck up this opportunity for me as well. Like it's like you're going to suggest people that you know are not going to put your ass on the line. You know what I mean? And that's just, I think, the reality of this industry is that it is like, that's why they say it's like the business of making friends. It is, but I think it's also the business of like finding friends that you actually trust, because it's like everything everyone does kind of does have this like, I don't know, it's just this weight on it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I talk in circles. Literally, I was talking before. I was talking in circles for, I think, like 2 minutes. And then you just said one sentence that completely encapsulated what I was saying. But so all this to say, back to my master's, it was like really fun. And I'm so happy I did it. I'm actually really happy I did it for the people that I met through that program, because now I've met some of like my dearest friends and like lifelong writing partners, which is so valuable and very rare. So I'm really grateful for that. In that sense, the program itself was like still in its first few years of inception. So it wasn't fully like, I don't think they maxed out as much as they could have in terms of like the program itself.
Yeah.
And that's not really giving any hate. That's just like, I think, a critical appraisal of my experience. I mean, we were really the second cohort to go through it. So,
I imagine putting together a writing program is especially hard. It's not like a business program.
Right. 100%. And I think like it, and I think it does take some like, trial and error. And I think we were more in the error side of things. But I mean, I'm grateful for being able to do it and to walk away and say I have an MFA. That's great. It was like always a goal of mine, and I'm proud that I
Do you feel too like when you pay for something, you take it more seriously?
Well, I just work best in structure. I have ADHD, so like as much as like my brain does not work like structured. Structure is the best thing for ADHD, which is the hardest thing for people with ADHD to kind of achieve. So it's like always better when you enter an environment that's where the system is set up for you. And that's why I found it successful. And that's why I knew I wanted to kind of pursue master's in something creative, because I was like, well, this also gives me 2 years to write something. And I have to finish it at the end because someone is expecting that of me. And also I paid for it. So yeah, I don't think I'm super driven by like money I've spent. Like I know like in like for gyms, for example, like I'll pay for a gym for a whole damn year. I won't go one day. Like I don't feel that guilt about it. It's not the motivator for me.
Money, but like I did my first year in comedy, I did a stand-up class, the level 1 and then the level 2. Yeah. And this is my 3rd year now, and I'm doing the level 2 again, but it's a lab, so it's, I don't know. I just had this thing like coming into this 2025 new year. I was like, I need to like commit to writing. Yeah. And I wrote the most during my first year, I think, because I took those classes, and now I'm in the class and I am writing more, and it's like being around the other students, getting the prompt from the instructor of like what to focus on. And it's just, some of it is the money. I don't know. It's just something about the whole setup of it.
I think it legitimizes it too. I think it's the same way of like, if you were to show up and do like a commercial shoot, it's like everyone on set is still like, it's all make-believe. It's still like fake, but there's like a sense of legitimacy to it, so that you show up and you like, you don't feel weird. You don't feel like cringy, as opposed to like going to your friend's house and like shooting a sketch together. That feels way less like legitimate, and like, and so then that's where kind of the feelings of like imposter syndrome and like nervousness and can kind of play in, and things, or you don't end up filming it because you just feel like it's not as legitimate. For me, the master's program helped me, like you said, like find that structure, like also guidance. I think it was it's such a daunting task to be like, write a screenplay, like, especially for my brain, it's just like, oh, where do we even start? Like for me, I would start with like, I would get like hung up on like a character and then like give up, and that's kind of how my brain works. If it sees something like too high of a mountain in front of it, it's just going to kind of abandon. Yes. So it's nice to have like classes and courses where it's like, there's a map and there's like clearly like learning objectives and there's all these steps, but I'm not actively seeing them because I'm just kind of like buying into it and someone's just telling me where to go. So that was helpful. Yeah. And I've always liked school for that reason, because it does give you kind of like a curriculum that you need to stick to and adhere to.
Yeah. You're not just like out in the woods on your own, maybe being like, fuck it.
Yeah, exactly. Or you're not just like, at home, like kicking yourself, being like, why am I not doing this? Yeah. But overall, it was a positive experience. Even though I do think academia is a complete scam.
Is it kind of like marriage? It is a scam, but like,
it works for some people. Yeah. I like that. Yeah, it is kind of like marriage. It works for some people. Except you can't divorce from your student loans. And that would be nice if I could divorce from my university and take half their money. That'd be great. But yeah, no, I don't know. More and more, I'm more like, and maybe it's just the university I was at. I'm like, this maybe is a scam, you know? Because I feel like now with like something I've been thinking about is like, do I now, as someone with my master's, do I now like offer like courses, like, to help like people write?
Oh, you fucking should.
I should. It feels really cringy to do, but it's something that I've thought about because I'm like, well, then why the hell else did I get this degree? You know what I mean? And then also it's like, especially with screenwriting, because that's what it was a script writing and story design program. Like script writing has such an interesting history because like it kind of was born out of this like need to movie make, and then it replaced for a lot of the first screenwriters were authors that kind of just like pivoted into this medium. And now I see it all the time where like I'll see like, especially with comedians, it's like their agents just assume that because they can write jokes that they know how to write a screenplay.
Yeah.
And so the structure of like script writing is very rarely upheld. And so I'm such a nerd about structure.
Yeah.
So
okay, I would take your class.
Yeah. So I think about that a lot of like, okay, well, if your agent is asking you to like write a sitcom, like there's a way to do that, and there's some things that you have to hit in order for it to like really exist in the genre. So I'm like, maybe making like a class more accessible would be helpful because like then everyone has a portfolio piece at the end. I don't know. I've thought about it a little bit, but then it feels weird to like teach your peers, Yeah. It feels weird to teach like.
But sometimes you have to get past that. Yeah. I think you should do it. I did a class through Second City that was like intro to screenwriting, and that was really helpful because I didn't know anything. Yeah. And then and then I wrote a screenplay, but it's not very good. And I sent it for coverage, which was really helpful. But I still I would like a second, like not total beginner, but second beginner level class that's like bring your written screenplay and we work on it. And I just don't.
Yeah, a workshop of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think too, like.
But I think I think there's a market for both the super entry level and the next
and then the
level.
Like workshop your screenplay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it would be cool to do that, and I'm someone who's very like community based, and I love to work like any community I'm part of. Like I really love to give back to it, so I've just kind of always been like that. So I think it would be valuable in terms of like there is definitely like a market for that. I would just have to get over the part where I'm teaching people I know. Yeah. Also, I've never taught anything, so I'm like, would I even be good at it? Like,
I believe there's an episode of The Simpsons where Bart wants to drop out of school, and they're like, well, Bart, what are you going to do with a 4th grade education? And he goes, teach 3rd grade.
That's so smart.
And I literally do believe that. Not everyone, but a lot of people, anything they know, they can explain to someone else. So
yeah, I mean, some bad people are bad at explaining things.
But you're good at explaining things.
Oh, thank you.
So you can definitely teach people how to write.
Yeah, maybe. That would be fun. I worry that it would like take away from my own writing, but maybe I won't know until I try, so I really shouldn't be angry.
Yeah. If you did one 6-week course and you were like, that sucked, you can just not do it again.
Yeah. It's just funny. It's just like no matter how much you do, like I think like the imposter syndrome is just so real, Like I feel like still, like I feel like even you just being like a 6-week course, like I'm like, oh my God, who would even come to that? And then I'm like, I literally have a master's in this subject. I'm like, I think that's what am I to give that class? No, literally, I'm like, that's what I did. Like that's what I did for 2 years. Why can't I stand in that? I think there's so much about that. Even though in stand up, like the last like year and a half, I've really been thinking about like the courage to kind of even stand in like being stand-up, I don't know if that makes sense, but so much of like what we do is like so vulnerable and hard. And I think when you start stand-up, you're just kind of trying to like get on stage, and you know, you're just trying to get through your first 5 minutes, and you're just trying to remember all your jokes, and you're trying not, for me, my only goal was, I was like, just don't be the worst one.
Yeah.
You can be the second worst.
Yeah.
And that's a good night, but don't be the worst one, you know? So like that. And then as time goes on and then you're doing longer and longer sets, like your goals change and stuff. And I just started watching like, you know, headliners that I loved in the city. And I was like, wow, there's so much courage too, and just like standing for so long on stage and like owning the room. It's like such a piece of it that I think I don't hear a lot of people talk about, but it's like, it's really hard. Like, I think recently I did a show and I did 30 minutes and I was like, oh, there's so much like more to this than just going up and having 30 minutes worth of material.
Yeah.
You have to really stand in the fact that you're like, I am the headliner. I am ending the show. I am responsible for 30 minutes. I am responsible for all of these people. And if you don't show up with that confidence of like, I am here to do that thing, I am the guy or I am the girl, people feel that. Yeah. And so there's such a difference between someone who goes on stage and does 30 minutes and someone who goes on stage and headlines. Yeah. And I'm like very obsessed with what that magnetism, what that power is.
And I think it's, because when you're new, it's also like, it's good etiquette to stick to your time, and you think about that. Like, I need to get off in 5 minutes. I can't fuck around.
Yes.
So and then it's a switch over to be like, I'm the main event.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, you know, like sometimes I've even seen headliners that I was like, well, I didn't really laugh that much during the 30 minutes. And like, you know, you do that when you're like looking up at people. It's very easy to like kind of go into a more like critical mindset. And then when you're there, you're like, wow, like you have a deeper appreciation for like how hard it is, and how so much of it is also like mental fortitude of like, like I'm always amazed at people who produce their own shows and headline them. Like, I'm like, how do you, like, that is, like, if you produce, you know, like producing is hell. Like it's so stressful. You're responsible for everything. You're responsible for the venue being happy with you. You're responsible for the comics being happy with you, and the comics getting paid, and the comics having an audience. You're responsible for the audience in a sense because they purchased the tickets from you. You're responsible for everything. Yeah. And then on top of that, you're also the headliner. I'm like, how do you build up that much confidence and like also the ability to like compartmentalize like that?
So I did actually, like, because I produce Funny Bitches with Karen Mitches, but I'm typically the host. Yes. And then there was one time where I decided to headline my show. Yeah, which is smart too. Because I was desperate. I was like, no one's going to let me headline in this town. I'm nobody. Yeah. So
it's a very smart thing to do.
Believe in myself. And then I immediately panicked. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to fuck up. And I got George Rivard to host. And I think that's the best thing you can do if you're producing and headlining, is just get a host who's like the best fucking host.
Yeah. I mean, George is, so good. Yeah. It's
because they kind of carry the energy of the show, and
they carry that burden for you.
Yeah. And then when you get on stage, if everybody's like in a great place, it's so much easier to succeed.
That's so smart and true. I think you're right. I produced a show on New Year's Eve and I was the headliner, and I kind of just wanted to try it out because it's kind of a goal this year to just get to 45 or get comfy to even do that. Like that's kind of been the goal this year.
That's crazy.
And so I did it on New Year's Eve because I was like, why not just rip it? You know, who cares? And like in Montreal, my own city, like no problem. And you're right. Like I was so lucky. I kind of did it not bullet style, shotgun style. So it's like, I think now if I was to do it again, I would have a host. But I was so grateful because like one of my best friends, Tom, opened the show, and he, similar to George, is just like so good and so comfy and so good at making everyone feel like at home and like just like good and good vibes. And thank God he was there because I like hated the whole night. Like I was just so stressed the whole night because I had a hard time being like, okay, all these people paid this money to see the comics, obviously, but then like I have to close out the show. Yeah. And I'm like, And then I didn't feel like great about how it went because I just couldn't disconnect from like the producer side of things. Because I'm like, if they hate me, then they hated this whole show. You know, and it's like rejection twice.
Yeah. So it's just that's a lot like the risk to combine.
Yeah. Because it's like, imagine you produce a show and then you ruin it.
Yeah. Well, the first time I produced a show, I wasn't headlining it, but I did really feel bad at the end of it. And everyone was like, no, it was great. Like, I got half the venue sold out, which was a good physical showing. And like, everyone did well. Nobody bombed. But I'd seen my headliner annihilate a club. And like, that's why I had her on. And then she did really well, but she didn't do as well. And I was like, because I wasn't as good of a host and I didn't get the energy where I wanted it. On yourself, and I was just like, I don't know, like other people do this so much better than I do. And then I didn't produce again for like half a year.
Yeah. And that's why like producing is like, again, it's so hard. And that's why I have so much respect for people who produce shows and then headline them. Because I'm like, there's so much there that you have to also like emotionally untangle before, leading up to it, day of, literally after, like.
And like producing is like practical, and then comedy is like you need to be in your fun open side. Yeah. So
it's really hard.
This mindset ruins this vibe.
Yeah.
You go onto stage with your serious face and like.
Yeah. It's like, how do you go from like refreshing your Eventbrite every 15 seconds that whole day to just being like the coolest person on like, stage
welcome
of like
to my party.
Yeah, like and I always like really want to make everyone feel like we're all kind of like in a basement together. That's kind of what I'm always like, I just want everyone to leave and be like, wow, we just all like hung out in a basement, like that 70s show style. We just like kicked it and it was just sick. And like, so I try to bring that energy. It's like very hard to pivot into that like chill kind of like cool mindset.
Yeah.
When like literally 25 minutes earlier you were like calculating, like doing math on the tickets and like how much everyone's going to get paid. And yeah, so I just have so much respect for the people in the city I watch do that. I'm like, good on you. Like that you can pivot that way.
Yeah.
But I think it comes back to a lot of like standing in your own, like standing and betting on yourself.
Yeah.
And then even when it goes wrong, just like still betting on yourself.
Yeah.
Continuing to bet on yourself, doubling down.
Even when I headlined, I only did 15 minutes. So I feel like I do need to think about that like in the future or when I get to headline again of like, I don't know, that kind of presence.
Yeah, it's hard. I think that's why it takes so long. I think that's why like comedians always talk about how like it takes like, I don't know, 6 to 10 years to like find your voice and really like get to like to be like in your element that way. Like I think there's so much like rewiring of your brain you have to do, I think, as a performer to like not let any of like the anxiety of it all like and
some of it like you can't think your way through it. It's from the experience of having done it.
Yeah. And also it's like you put your body. I was talking to someone the other day. I was like, oh, I just realized like we all just show up because shows are at night. It's like, I don't know about you, but like I don't really eat dinner before a show just because I feel like it will make me lethargic or whatever. Just like that's not my headspace, isn't to like eat and then like go to a show. And then so I'm just like, oh, I've just been eating adrenaline for dinner like every night.
Yeah.
For how long? Like, is that good to just have, because you do get anxious right before you go on stage. Like those nerves kind of don't ever really go away. Then you go on stage and either whether you bombed or whether you did well, there is kind of like an adrenaline hit that you like have to like come down from. And I was thinking about it, I was like, that really can't be good for like your nervous system to just be like raw dogging adrenaline every night for dinner.
Yeah.
So I think about that a lot. So
I have thought about that just not in terms of the eating, but just in terms of if I have all these adrenaline spikes.
Yeah.
Is that good for me? Like I already have an anxiety disorder. Am I making it worse?
Yeah. Because then also it's like, you've ever heard of comedians talk about like after they do like a theater show or something, like I'm talking like big, like now, like super famous comedians who are like, yeah, whenever I do like a big show or even like Justin Bieber, like just big shows, it's like they're like, well, we can't just like go home because there's so many stories of like people who like do a big show, they go back to the hotel room and then they want to kill themselves because they're like, how did I go from this like incredible high where I'm like absorbing so much energy and love and like nothing will ever feel that good, and then like going to like doing that and then like going to a hotel and just like sitting on a hotel like and like watching TV in a hotel room, like the like
I need 50,000 of my best friends with
it's like
right
I was
now.
just with 50,000 people and now I'm alone in a hotel room, like of course I want to kill myself, you know. So I've heard a lot of comedians talk about how like they need to go do a hang after, like it's really great for them to like have the show and then go get food with like, you know, their team or like some other comics. Like I think a lot of the time when comedians come through and do shows, like, you know, they do want a little bit of the hang, like whether it just be like an hour after, just to come down to kind of have something in between, so you're not going from like a stage to a hotel room and like, and it's such a deep, because you do feed off of this like
a
insane
gentle sort of come down,
insane like serotonin, insane, I don't know if it's serotonin,
to look into
dopamine.
this more. This is because I never really thought about that.
I was thinking about it a lot, and I was like I was like saying that to a few comedians in a green room this week, and they're like, yeah, I guess. And I was like, are you not more worried about this? Like, I'm worried. Like,
but a lot of them are younger and they're male, so they haven't.
It was mostly men, and they were kind of like, yeah, I guess. And I was like, you guys are worried? Like, this can't be good for us. Like, truly, like,
but
physically.
They're in the category of people who's more likely to kill themselves because they don't take care of themselves.
I mean, I guess one of them did like literally go outside and chain smoke. So like, were they worried? Maybe
you might not. Some people aren't aware of their mental health, but they still are affected by the same things we are. And if we figure it out, they'll learn from us.
Don't you love it when you start talking about your mental health with somebody and like you're being really open and you have like and then they like just kind of like stare at you and they don't really know what to say, and they're like, and then you're like, oh, did I just rip open like a corner of the universe for you? Like sometimes I say things, some people, like I see people go, I don't want to think about that. Why did you bring that up? Or like they actually have no idea what I'm talking about. Like that. The adrenaline for dinner.
It's very helpful if you don't contextualize things in that way. Okay, is there anything you want to plug, even just your socials?
You can follow me on Instagram. Really is where I'm doing most of my stuff right now. Michelle Forrester on Instagram. I'm taking the month of February off comedy, which is very scary because I've never done that, but I think I need to. So I'm taking a break in February.
Good mental
but I will be back in March. I'm gonna take a month and have regular dinner every night. And then but I'll for sure be doing stuff in March, and I post all my shows on my Instagram, so that's where you'll find me.
Amazing.
And I'm not really doing anything fun at the moment, so there's nothing much else to plug. But thank you for having me. It was so fun.
Thanks for coming, Michelle. And on my end, every fourth Monday of the month, I produce and host Funny Bitches with Karen Mitches at Backroom Comedy Club. That's the fourth Monday of the month at 8 p.m. Backroom Comedy Club.
Amazing.
Thanks, Michelle.
Bye.